Wish you were one of those influencers with raving fans who binge on your every word, consume all your content, buy everything you have to sell, and demand even more? Then stay tuned while Authority Magazine columnist and BuzzFeed contributor Tracy Hazzard shares strategies, tips, and tactics from top videocasters, podcasters, authors, and social influencers on creating that bingeable factor. Now, let's join Tracy as she explores how to rise above all the digital noise with the Binge Factor.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Binge Factor. I'm Tracy Hazzard, and I have a flip on our episode today. I've got a binge listener for you to talk about the Binge Factor, to talk about what she looks like. So I met her because I have a podcaster named Jen Du Plessis, who's a part of our Podetize platform. And Jen was talking to me about how she was so shocked when she got contacted by her biggest fan and what it felt like to be reached out by a binge listener. I said, you know what, that would make a great episode. Do you think she'd want to come on the show? And she did. So I've got Jennifer Otto today. She's a 25-year mortgage lender. She's got two daughters, two adult daughters, and a dog. She loves ballroom dancing and she loves podcasts, and that's why she's coming on the show to talk about that. So I'm so thankful to Jen Du Plessis for introducing us. Jen's show is Mortgage Lending Mastery. I almost messed that up. Mortgage Lending Mastery, and that's the one that that Jennifer has been listening to, has been binge listening to, and not just that. She's done more things with Jen since she reached out to her. So I'm going to let Jennifer talk to us about that. So everyone, let's talk to a binge listener. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on and being our first binge listener that we get to talk to on the Binge Factor.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So how long have you been a podcast fan?
Oh gosh, probably just about since May or June of last year. So only I guess I'm coming up on a year now.
So about a year. Well, that's really interesting. And so when did you really realize that you were binging on them? Like you were like constantly listening or listening to all the episodes in someone's series?
I think it was probably when I started with a true crime podcast, and it was following a lady who had gone missing in a small town in rural Georgia, which isn't too terribly far from me. And so when I realized that there was this whole other world of podcasts out there and all of this material a lot of people put out for free, I started really wanting to see what else was available. And because I'm in the mortgage space, it just kind of followed that you would listen to mortgage podcasts. And so I started listening to a few. And as I was trying to find one that I really enjoyed, I stumbled across an interview on another podcast with Jen Du Plessis. And then I went and found hers, and it kind of was a rabbit hole from there. And I am an avid listener, and just kind of started at the oldest one that was on the site and have just binged as far forward as I can go with my time.
I love that. Well, and at what point in listening to Jen did you decide to reach out to her? Because obviously she introduced us. So I wouldn't know that you were her binge listener, her biggest fan, right? I wouldn't know that if she hadn't introduced us. So at some point you must have reached out to her. What made you do that? And when did that happen in your how many episodes in before you did that?
Gosh, I was probably 40 or 50 episodes in. And she was talking in one of them about her website and some of the things that she offered. Just a fun fact real quick, I've been in the business for a long time, but I've recently made a change from being in support to now being an originating loan officer. So that was part of the reason I really got into listening to her podcast. And so it was about at that episode 50, she was talking about ballroom dancing. And I was standing in the bathroom, and my husband was sitting on the bed, and we were getting ready for, bed or whatever. And I was like, she started talking about ballroom dancing. I was like, that's it. I love this woman. I have to meet her. Everything about her, I want to emulate everything about her business. I love ballroom dancing. I love the way she speaks to people. I love her, just everything about her. So I went to her website and couldn't figure out what I needed to do. And so I reached out to her from there and was like, hey, I really want to get this program, but it was something she was in the transition of doing away with. So that's kind of how we talked. And it was so funny. The very first conversation, I was like, I'm such a fangirl right now. I really wanted to go, oh my gosh, I'm so talking to Jen.
Well, today is such a funny day because I just interviewed someone who I'm a fan of, a writer who I follow. I've read all his books. I read his column all the time and all the articles he writes. So I just fangirled out on someone myself, and now now I'm interviewing a fangirl. How fun is that? So, well, you know what? I think that's really classic, though, that we find something that we're interested in learning about. And then we find someone who resonates with us like you have found with Jen. And then we want to know more about them, right? And we want to consume more of their things. So that's exactly, you're following the model of what we've been telling people out there, that this is, if you build these wonderful binge factors and you're authentically you, because Jen is very her.
Yes.
That is who she is. From who she is on the show is not a persona. And have you discovered that with interacting with her in real life?
Yes, I actually attended her workshop. So I enrolled in her class that started in November, and the culmination of that class was a workshop in Florida, the beginning of March. And so, yeah, it was just great. And I told her, I warned her, I was like, I'm going to totally fangirl out on you in person because, I'm getting to meet you in person. But yeah, no, she's absolutely as genuine and warm as she comes across on her podcast. And even moving forward in coaching further with her, she truly has such a heart for people, and that really comes through on her podcast. And just getting to know her and getting to know her family and, the different things, that little nuances that she's dropping in her podcast. And I'm like, I feel like I know you and like know where you go to church and know your husband's name and your kids' names. And so you kind of feel like I think it's kind of this social media thing, right? We like to kind of be that peeping Tom, if you will, where you get to peek in on people's lives and what they share on social media. And, podcasting is them literally getting to share their voice and their thoughts and all of those kinds of things. So you really get an inside peek into what they're thinking and how they go about stuff.
Yeah. And you know what? You're tapping into something so fun and fantastic. So we don't often, as hosts of shows, get to get connected with fans. So the fact that you reached out is really valuable and really helpful. Usually we hear from people when they dislike something. Like, we only hear the negative. We don't always get to hear the positive until they go pretty far. And that's what I discovered as well. It was about 100 episodes into my first podcast, and someone reached out to me on social media, and I thought, oh, people are binge listening to me? Like, that's crazy. I didn't even know that was a thing. And then it started to cascade into more people finding little ways to reach out to me. And I remember one time doing it, you were talking about ballroom dancing, but so it's kind of a personal, but it's like an aside story. I was talking about ordering ice cream, like literally ordering it over Facebook and having it delivered to my house from this woman who had a really interesting business model. And so I was talking about it from a business model perspective, but I was talking about the idea of ordering ice cream, right? And that we did do it. And so they reached out to me and go, what flavors did you order? Like, I didn't say it on the show. They were frustrated with me. And so I was like, oh, and that was that moment that I realized I have to complete the whole story for everybody. I got to remember to give them a little bit more detail than this, drop this little like personal touch that I like ice cream, right?
Yes, exactly. No, that's
so
fun.
Did you end up taking ballroom dancing? I mean, you may not have, or are you trying it maybe on your own from YouTube and while you're sequestered? Well, I guess you're out, right? You're in Georgia, so you're out.
Well, I actually had been doing ballroom dancing before I found her. So it was just kind of like it was another tick box that it was like, yes, I thought I loved this woman. I am convinced now that I do absolutely love this woman. And she's a dog lover. So, it's like all of the things. It's just like tick, 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 tick. So it was just kind of fun.
That's fantastic. I love that. Well, let's talk a little bit about your listening habits in general, because I want people to hear what it's like from a listener's perspective, because you'd be shocked, but so many podcasters are not listeners.
That seems silly to me.
Doesn't it seem crazy to you? It does to me too, but so many of my clients, I have over 330 or so at this point, and so many of them are not listeners. And I always thought that was unusual. But listeners adopt a different method when they're searching for new shows. So you mentioned that you heard Jen on another podcast, and then you decided to check her show out. So what's the process when you went to go check her show out? What did you do? What is checking someone's show out that you think you might want to try?
Well, I liked what she was talking about on the podcast, and I thought, I've not ever heard that before. And so in the show notes, thankfully they put a link to her podcast in the show notes of the podcast I was listening to, and just went straight to it and was like, I always want to look to see how many episodes are there. When was the most recent one put out? If it's something that's not currently actively dropping episodes, I don't want to invest the time, because I'm like, if they're not putting anything out current, then, unless it's a story, but if it's business related, I want to see that they're current, that there's something current. So when I saw she had so many episodes, and I loved that the way she started it, like literally her first 4 or 5 episodes were just kind of quick. I think it was just monologues where she was just explaining kind of her philosophy and how she ran her business. And I've actually listened to those few episodes more than one time, even since I've been in her coaching. And I'm in her coaching program. I'll go back and listen to them because there's things that I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And it's just easier for me to listen to podcasts than necessarily watch YouTube videos or something like that. If I'm driving around, I can just pop in my podcast. And I think I mentioned to you before we started all of this, but I like to listen to things on a fast speed, just because I'm a DI on the disc profile. And so I want all of the things right now. If I could listen to 2 podcasts and read a book and watch a movie all at the same time and actually grasp the information, that would be amazing.
I think you have to have an accident and where your brain is adjusted to be able to do that. So I really hope you don't get to that stage.
No. So, but when I went and found her, and then, like I said, saw that it was currently actively still in production, I definitely was like, well, I definitely want to listen to this. And then as I started listening to her, and just her being real, just the authenticity that
Did you go back to the first episode then? And
Yes.
That's what you said. So you went back to the first episode, but when you were testing it, did you just read the description or did you listen to that first episode?
I listened to it. I listened to them all. And, I've kind of gotten to where I'll start jumping around a little bit more now with the description of the episode. But for the first probably 60 hours, 70 hours, I don't know what I'm up to now, but it was all just straight binging, listening to it.
Wow.
When I was walking in the morning, when I'm on the treadmill, on the way to work, on the way home, I would lay in bed and listen to it at night. In the shower, I actually bought a special speaker to listen to it in the shower.
But to listen to all your podcasts, not just Jen.
Right, exactly.
Let's be clear on that, Jen. we might be really treading over into the biggest fan territory now.
It was just all the time, because at the time I was still working my support role job, so I couldn't listen to it at work because I was still riding a desk, 9 to 5. So I had to find every extra moment to try to listen and absorb as much information as I could.
Well, this is what I want you all to hear out there, your listeners out there I've been harping on this for as many episodes as I've done, which is close to 100 or something for this particular show by the time Jennifer's is airing here. That what she's saying there is very clear, is that when you want to learn something, when you're that personality's got to get it tomorrow, got to get it today instead of tomorrow, right? Then you're on that path, then you need to be able to consume it in any which way you can. And it helps you grow, right? That's the point of it.
Yes.
You used it to help you grow and shift your business and shift your model of what you were doing into what you wanted to be doing. And that's fantastic.
And it shifted my mindset. It got to where I literally felt like I was parroting out of my mouth the things that she harped on so much in her podcast. And at one point, my husband said, "You sound like Jen on your podcast." I mean, because he knew, because I was just like, "So today on the podcast, Jen said this," and as if I knew her, and he's like, "You do realize you don't know her?" I'm like, "No, but I will. I'm going to."
It's going to happen. I love that. Well, sometimes some people think that being a podfaster is a bad thing. I'm a podfaster too, so I get that. And that's because I'm impatient and I talk fast, so I think fast, right? Mm-hmm. So that's my thing as well. But being a podfaster is kind of a benefit, like being able to get through that content in a quick way allows you to cram a lot more than other people. So it's a competitive advantage.
Yes. And we only have 24 hours in a day. We hear that all the time. And so if you're trying to better yourself, if you're trying to even audio books, I listen to everything just as quick as I can. YouTube videos, just because I'm always like, I have 10 minutes. What can I do real quick? Can I listen to a podcast? Can I watch a video? Can I whatever? And because we all have so much limited time, even now, to just, if I've got so many appointments, while I was sitting waiting to talk to you today, I had a podcast pulled up and was listening to that. So, and I do like to listen to some for fun, but I do tend to be pretty intense. So I do listen to a lot more like motivational things or business type things, because I do feel like that it's an investment in my future. And because so many of the things, people will give you so much information on podcasts. I'm like, it's just fantastic. I mean, you can learn how to do anything. It's crazy.
Well, tell me some of the things, because you've listened to a lot of different types of shows. Tell me some of the things that annoy you the most about shows. And you don't have to be specific. You don't have to out anyone. I'm not going to make you be the mean girl.
Honestly, I don't think I make it past more than a couple episodes if they do something that really drives me nuts. So I can't really put my finger on it. Things that I tend to enjoy more are I am taking a foray into comedy. My husband said I'm always too serious, that I needed to have a little bit of fun in life, but I am very picky with my comedy. And so, I haven't quite found that, but everybody I talk to, always ask them, what are you reading, or what podcast are you listening to? And so I always have a running tab of things that I'm trying out. I love the true crime stuff. So I don't know that I have anything that annoys
so
me.
If you quit a show after a couple episodes, what's usually the factor?
Either I don't like the personality, I just don't like, either they're too crass, or they're too slow and boring, or they're, either it just doesn't grab my attention, that I'm not like, ooh, I want to listen to that podcast. If I don't feel that way, then I'm like, it's probably not for me, so it's not anything specific. If it just doesn't excite me, then I don't listen anymore.
Yeah. Well, and some of the factors, I think that, little detail things, like if the sound's really bad, it can really get to you after a while. But I think, aren't you a little more forgiving that, when a show starts, it's worse than it gets better over time? So are you a little more forgiving of that? You'll like, if I really like the host, I'll give it a chance.
Of course. Yeah. As long as I can understand what they're saying, it doesn't have to be, I don't necessarily need the bumpers and all of the music and all of that. Because honestly, as a podcaster, as you know, music sounds really funny at 1.5 speed.
Right. And we've heard it before because we listened to it 5 times in a row. We'd rather just skip it right now. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's so interesting. So I think we're getting some really great lessons that podcasters can apply. I mean, you said, be human, be current, be helpful, right? Like, I mean, you want to learn something, right? So I think those are really great ongoing things that almost anyone could do. We don't need to be specially trained to do those things.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that just, it translates though to how the listener receives that. So what you were mentioning about how you're always keeping a listener at. Do you actually go out there and ask people what their favorite show and their favorite, podcast is, or their favorite book? Do you ask them that whenever you meet them?
Yeah. So I'm not going to give too much of Jen's program away, but she has a really great mini course that is how to go from intro to income. And it's kind of around the whole network marketing or networking thing. And so as I am meeting people at networking events and trying to build my network of people I want to work with, part of getting to know them is asking them, what are you reading now? Or are you listening to podcasts? Do you like Audible books? Do you like Kindle books? Because some people are still physical book people. Some people would rather listen to books because they're in the car, or they're walking their kids or whatever. Some people, I still am amazed. I talk to so many people who don't listen to podcasts, and I'm like, oh my gosh, well, so I have a list of things. I'm like, you should listen, I'm going to send you this one and this one and this one, and like, just check them out and see what you think. And I'll have people come back to me and go, oh my gosh, that was such a great podcast. Thank you so much. Or, I learned so
when you
much.
get to know more about someone, you can be more custom in your answers because you've got such a broad repertoire of shows you've listened to. You can share. That's really great and valuable, Jennifer. And wow, thinking about those of us shows that you end up listening to, all of those hosts should be so grateful to you that you're not only a fan, but you share it, which is really, the ultimate goal. When I used to design products, I used to say, it wasn't just that I wanted somebody to buy my product that I designed, but I wanted them to buy it, use it again and again, and rave to their friends about it. Like
yes.
and that's the same thing I've applied to content, to the podcast, to everything that I do. And I think that that's a good approach, that the minute you've hit on that, you've hit on a great binge factor yourself. So you've tapped into that. Well, I love how much you're sharing and what you're doing with everything. Now, did you know Jen's starting a new show?
I did not.
So I've gotten to give you that big reveal.
Yes.
Jen is starting a new show, and she gave me permission to kind of mention it out there, because what I want to know is if Jen starts a new show that's called Success to Significance, would you be interested in following her there?
Oh yeah, I'd love that.
See, off topic, you're not really sure that has something to do with real estate, but it still has Jen in it. So why wouldn't you, right?
Well, and what's really funny with what you said is one of my core values is significance. So anything that has significance in it, I'm like, yes, let me check that out, because that is one of my core values is significance.
Wow, that's fantastic. So, well, actually that's exactly the thing. So when I heard that she was doing that, I thought, it fits her too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of her core values as well. So, I see, that's what I wanted people to really realize out there, is that even when you make a pivot, when you make a shift in your show, or you make a shift in the industry of what you're doing, and you shift completely, you're still able to take a good subset of your valuable audience who really were there because they knew they were getting value from you. You're going to come with them. You're going to give it a shot. Maybe it'll be great. Maybe it's not for them, but that's okay. But they will at least try it because they already built up a rapport like you have with Jen. So
exactly. Well, and I think for me, it's so much about the personality of the people, like the actual human being that's on the other side of the microphone. If I like them and I like how they think and what they're doing and what they're talking about, I mean, like, she could start talking about ballroom dancing or talking about dogs or talking about, real estate or architecture. And I would probably be like, what is she doing now? Let me check that out. Even if it's not necessarily a field I'm necessarily enjoy, but it's because I know what kind of product she puts out. I know that it's going to be high quality. I know that she's going to know what she's talking about. And I think she's hilarious. She's got a great personality and she's entertaining. So yeah, all of the things, I would absolutely listen to her, as long as she's not talking about like watching paint dry or something.
Yeah. Not ready for that.
No, for sure. But yeah, I definitely think that as that pivot, I would definitely give it a shot and listen to her for sure.
Well, it sounds, Jennifer, that you have a great personality and sort of deep values in being curious and a continual learner. That was like, it was there before podcasting came about, and you've just used the media to help, the medium, if you want to call it that, right, to help accelerate your learning process.
Yes. And I love it so much. I tell people all the time, and I hope this doesn't discourage podcasters, but I tell all of my people that I'm talking to about podcasts, I'm like, there's so much information, like coaches and, all sorts of people in different industries. When they have a podcast that's engaging, they typically give away a lot of really great information. And it's like, all you have to do is listen. If you listen and write down notes and implement one thing from a podcast you listen to today, your life can be so much further along in the future. And, I like to listen to like little motivational ones that are super quick and easy in the morning. And, so there's just so many things that podcasters do and give away for free. And I hate to say for free, but it's so valuable to those of us who are listeners, because it's not just fluff. You go to a lot of these webinars, you see these ads, you go to these webinars and, oh, this guru is going to give you that and this guru is going to give you that. But I find that a lot of times there's not really any substance there because it's kind of a gotcha. Whereas with podcasting, and I don't know why this is, I'm sure you could explain to me like the whole reason of why this is, but I feel like that there's really a lot more substance in there than fluff. And I'm like, this is a really untapped resource for people who are curious and who do want to learn and maybe don't want to invest thousands and thousands of dollars into something. It's a great place to get a jump start. Because that's how I kind of started building my platform and building my structure of my company and my business was based a lot off of just Jen's podcast. Now, of course, the coaching program has helped me go deeper, and I'm definitely not saying don't pay for coaching. It definitely has made things go deeper, and it's gotten me a lot further than I could have gotten on my own.
But you knew you were ready for it. You knew you were ready for what Jen had, and you, in a sense, warmed yourself up, which makes our job as salespeople, because, so obviously everyone's selling something, right? Mm-hmm. It makes it easier, right? Absolutely. Well, I think you're tapping into, Jennifer, and talking about the thing that I find really exciting about it is that it's really hard to sustain authenticity week after week on a podcast. You can structure a show, script a show, do all of that. You can script a webinar to hype up everybody's adrenaline and get them going and get that flowing so that they'll buy at the end or when you're doing it on stage. But to do that in every single episode week after week, that's not sustainable. It's exhausting. It's a full-time job. And I don't see it having the value at the end of the day. So I think that's why podcasting has gotten to be a little more authentic. It's gotten to be that more human touch because we don't sit down and we don't read a script and we don't go through those. Now, there are great shows that do that, but that's why they drop a season at a time because it's a lot of work.
Yes. No, I love that. I get that. And I think that because, everybody is talking about in sales that you want people to know, like, and trust you. And what better way than for people to sit around and be authentic in this podcast medium? So yeah, I literally didn't call her and was like, well, I don't know. What about, I was like, how can I buy things from you? What do I need to do? Here's my credit card. How do I buy things from you?
There you go, everybody. Bingeability sells. Yes, there you go.
Exactly. So it wasn't like, what do you have? And I don't know. Can you give me a discount? And, blah, blah, blah. It was like, I want the things you have. I want all the things you have. And here's my credit card. And, and there's other people I listen to that it's like, I like them. And it's kind of a buffet that I'm like, oh, I can take this piece from them and that piece from them, but I'm not calling them. I'm not reaching out to them. I'm not, compelled.
So there was a connection that's a little deeper with Jen, and that's how that worked. And that's really her bingeability factor. Well, just last thing before we go, Jennifer, I just want to say, is there any advice you have out there for podcasters on how they can connect better with, how they can offer to connect better to their binge listeners, how they can encourage you guys to reach out to us?
I don't know. I know Jen had like a Facebook group. And so I definitely got in there and got involved. And I don't know that this is something that you guys can do, but I am a Droid user. So I would love to be able to support my podcast friends that I like to listen to, but there's not really a medium right now for us to provide feedback and reviews. And so, to all of you out there listening, please, 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 like the droids in us want to love on you guys too. But I definitely think that just being authentic is the way to do that, and having a forum, whether a Facebook group or some way that they can follow you, make it really easy for them to follow you and get in touch with you. Because we definitely want to have the two-way conversation somewhat that, you're talking to us through the microphone and we can't really talk back, but being able to have a way to reach out and have that conversation go a little bit deeper, I think would be a really cool thing.
Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing the binge listener perspective. I really appreciate your time today.
Of course. I've enjoyed being here. Thank you for having me.
Wow. I hope that was enlightening for you as it was for me. I keep saying these things again and again to my clients, and I keep saying them again and again on this show. And I was like, I believed that they were true from the amount of people, but it's so nice to hear that they're still true when you talk to a binge listener today. So this is another thing that you want to do. Confirm what your thinking is. Confirm it with your target audience. Confirm it with the people. So when you have a binge listener, especially someone who's come and bought from you, like Jennifer has done from Jen Du Plessis, when you look at that, that's an amazing connection. That's where bingeability is selling. You want more of those kind of people. So if they tell you, we want this from you, we'd like to hear about this topic, you do it. right? You absolutely do it. So, this is where we can get a great perspective that's not ours, because we're in the weeds of our show. We're in the weeds of our programs, our coaching, and all the things that we sell out there that we forget sometimes that we're not at the beginning. We're not learning. We're not there. We're not consuming so much content sometimes that we can't do it all. We can't implement it all. So that's where, when you are lucky enough to have a person like Jennifer Otto reach out to you, you take advantage of that. Ask them questions, really get to know them, serve them well with what you provide for them for sure, but use them as a point of research for yourself to improve your show and an opportunity to get more people like her or him into your program. So I'm glad I could bring you this episode and kind of open all of our eyes to what's going on that other side of things, the listener side of things, which can be so silent, especially in the beginning of your show. So once this happens to you, I can tell you it's going to give you drive to move on for quite some time. So you can find out all about Jen Du Plessis' show, Mortgage Lending Mastery. And of course, when her new show launches, I'll make sure to update the blog post. You can find that at thebingefactor.com. And as always, we have all kinds of resources and all things for you there as well at thebingefactor.com. And then don't forget that sometimes these turn into Authority Magazine articles. So you may want to go and follow me on Medium, and you can track those. We try to get them back into the blog post so that you'll be able to see that the Authority Magazine article came out as well. But sometimes we don't catch up as fast as it comes out. And so if you want to catch that, you might want to subscribe to me, Tracy Lee Hazzard, on Medium, and enjoy the Authority Magazine articles, which are the summaries of these, and maybe something more shareable rather than trying to share audio, which is not always the easiest thing in the world. So anyway, thanks so much for listening. I'm going to keep bringing you interesting things that affect our binge factor. So not just great podcasters out there, but interesting people, interesting stories, and I'll try to get some more binge listeners in the future, right? Let's keep up on that. Let's talk to some more podfasters. So, and I'm going to also try to get some pod faders on, some that had really successful shows, but I've quit them. So that's my goal for the future. So if you have anyone to suggest out, I would love for you to reach out to me at thebingefactor.com and let me know if you are, or if you know someone who's perfect for this show. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back next week with another episode of The Binge Factor.
You've been listening to the Binge Factor podcast. For more information on podcasting and videocasting success tips and tactics, please go to thebingefactor.com. And be sure to listen to our other show for podcasters called Feed Your Brand. If you'd like to be interviewed on this show, as well as featured in Tracy's column, please go to thebingefactor.com/guest and apply.